Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, one and all, to the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you transcend your purpose, the one that you thought you were destined for. Specifically, it's the story of an NFL kicker who found his true happiness in yoga, meditation, and in very unexpected ways. Have you ever felt, I think we all have this sense of we're supposed to do something, like it's our destiny to maybe take over the family business or to marry a certain somebody or to go to school for a certain thing. It might not even be sports, but you ever feel that pressure and then just totally feel like you've been side slashed and just everything has just been put on, a different path entirely? It can be really disruptive and disorienting and stressful. Well, that's something that happened to Sean Conley. He's our guest today. He is an ex-NFL kicker. He played with the Lions, with the Colts, the New York Jets, and he ended up suffering career-ending injuries from overtraining, actually. And as a result, it got him on the path to begin practicing yoga and meditation. It was part of his rehabilitation, and that really took him on a new path of mindfulness meditation and a philosophy as an entirely new direction in his life. He is now a yoga teacher himself, and he owns Amazing Yoga in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with his wife. And his book is called The Point After: How One Resilient Kicker Learned There Was More to Life Than the NFL. Hi, Sean. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you because I think it's so important when you hear this all the time, especially young people, where they feel kind of pushed into a destiny that they may or may not want. And when they start to embrace that, when it all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from underneath them, it can be so disorienting. And I love the fact that you really just segued and embraced this new way of life. So could you just start by setting the stage? Because I think it's important for people to realize just how much pressure and stress the NFL put on you when you were playing for them.
Yeah, that's such a great question. For me, the stress when I was in the NFL, when I first signed with the Detroit Lions, I felt like equal parts terrified and equal parts excited. Like this was it. I finally fulfilled my dream my whole life from like a very young age 8 when I started playing football. And now I'm in my early 20s. I had made it. But I remember sitting in the first meeting room with the team, and the head coach and all these players, like some Hall of Fame football players that I've watched on TV, and I so wanted to be like fully excited and like in the moment, yet at the same time I knew the next day was the first practice, and if I had a poor practice, I could be on my way out already. And so my story is, when we watch the NFL, we see Tom Brady and he has this really long career and all these other players. We think about all them, but the vast majority of NFL football players, their careers is more like mine, where it's just a flash. I played for 3 different teams over 3 seasons, and that's far more the typical when you look at all those players on the sidelines of that kind of career, where at any moment it's over.
And it has to feel especially disheartening because it wasn't because you were cut because of your performance. You were playing your heart out. It's almost like your own body betrayed you. Can you talk about that moment? What did it feel like when you just realized that your body was not going to be able to deliver what it needed to for you to stay in the NFL?
Yeah, that was a really hard moment for me. Like, most athletes, and I know myself, we want to leave the game on our own terms. Like, I'll retire when I'm ready. But I trained really hard, and over time, my body started to get beat up started to break down way before it should have. And so when my final team that I was with, or the second to last team I was with, the New York Jets, after a practice where I was having a lot of pain, I went to see the doctor, and he did this exam. He was feeling my hip flexors, and he spent all this extra time on my right leg, and I knew something must be up because he looked over the left leg really quick, and the right leg he kept pushing around with his thumbs. And he's like, I'm really sorry, but I can't find your hip flexor. It's degenerated. And that was the moment I knew for me, like my career is over. If I don't have a hip flexor in my right leg, my kicking leg, it's over. So for me, it wasn't really like over because I just went into this series of denial. Like this can't be true. This can't happen. So I kept going. I actually went and played for another team in a minor football league, which was the World Football League, until it just became physically impossible for me to play at that level. So I just kept pushing until it was over. And then when it was over, I went through this period of what next? And that was really hard. Because for me, up to that time, my whole identity, I was a football player. So, and then it was all of a sudden, you're not a football player.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm sure that, so it probably led to, and this is something that I read in your bio too, having insecurities both in and off the field. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the insecurities on the field where there's a saying as an NFL kicker, there's only one kicker on every NFL team, and that is you're only as good as your last kick. So you can go out there for one game and you can, make a 40-yard field goal to win the game or send it into overtime, and you can be the hero. But the next week, if you miss, now you're on the chopping block and you could be gone. So that was like the insecurity of always, like trying to be, there and be present and, being grateful for the job that I had, but knowing it could end at any moment. And the insecurities that I had off the field were, most of those came when I was released, because when I would be so high when I would sign with an NFL football team, like this is it, like I fulfilled my dream. But then when I would get cut, I would just come crashing down, and I would call myself a failure. I would start to go through this cycle in my mind about, what could I have done differently? Maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. And so those were like my biggest insecurities off the field. Always second guessing what I did as being the reason why I failed. And so, but the more I got cut, the less I did that. Luckily, I started getting used to failing, realizing it wasn't that big of a deal. I could actually learn from my failures, so to speak.
Yeah, I can imagine those pressures too. I've watched my fair share of NFL games, and you're right. I mean, that extra kick, that extra point can make the game. Mm-hmm. A lot of times a field goal is what makes the game, and they might not get you as close as you need to be. It might not be a 20-yard field goal. It could be a 40-yard field goal.
Right.
And everything relies on you. And there's also almost like this bit of an attitude for NFL players. Like,
I know where you're going.
You're not the quarterback. You're not getting sacked. You're not on the defense. You're not necessarily getting roughed up. They kind of protect you, right? So it's almost like, that precious little kicker, he should be able to handle it. So did that have something to do as well, where it wasn't,
yes,
you were different than the other players?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the kickers, the bigger challenge was the mental, because we're by ourselves. But yes, I went through that as well. I remember my my first year at the University of Pittsburgh, I wanted to show all the other players that I was just as tough as them. So I would spend a crazy amount of time in the weight room, in the stadium, running sprints, running up and down the stadium bleachers, because I wanted to show that, hey, I'm a real football player. And thinking back, it really made no sense. That led to part of my overtraining, because most of the training for a kicker is actually just not training, just resting. I learned that later in my career. But yeah, that was one of my insecurities, where I'd be in the weight room and I would always try to bench press just as much as the linebackers, and it really made no sense. But other kickers do that too. I'm not alone in that sort of thinking, but I think I took it to another level.
I see. So in a way, this is a lesson about, not overdoing it, not pressing yourself too hard either.
For sure.
I think too, the way you managed to just change and come around, and now you found mindfulness and yoga. So talk about that. I mean, you started doing this as part of your rehabilitation, right? Is that what
Absolutely.
started this journey?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was all it. My wife got into yoga at a very way before the times, you could say. She was like a pioneer in Pittsburgh teaching yoga. This was like in the mid 90s, before there was yoga studios and yoga clothing and all that good stuff. And so while I was playing the NFL, she would be like, "Hey, you should try this yoga. It's going to help you with your back. It'll help you with your hips." And I'm like, "No way, I'm not doing yoga. I'm just going to keep doing this, the gym and the weights and all that training." Well, of course she was right. And then when my career was over, physically, I was in such bad shape with my hips and my back, and I would have back spasms. I wouldn't be able to stand and watch a concert, or sometimes I couldn't even walk a few blocks down the street because my back would flare up and I had to come home and sit down. And so I got to a point where I felt like I had nothing to lose. So when I started doing yoga, within a few months, after trying everything over the years during my football career, trying different pain pills and muscle relaxants and chiropractors, I tried all that stuff that football players would do, and it didn't work long term. But then after a few months, I noticed my back healing, and next thing you know, my back was great. I almost to the point where I felt like I could make a comeback to the NFL, but I knew that wasn't the right thing for myself and my family. But then what I discovered, the more I practiced yoga, there was also these benefits that my wife always talked about. This will also help you with your mind, help you move past football, help you, because right at the same time my NFL career ended, my dad found out he had terminal cancer. So there was both of those right around the same time. He said, "Yeah, that'll help you with that," because I was having these really bad nightmares. And she was right. I kept practicing yoga, and I discovered this, this whole idea of breath work. And she told me "You'll learn how to breathe." I'm like, "What's breathe? I don't do that in sports." But she's like, "This isn't sports. Just try it." And the more I practiced yoga, then I realized, then that's when I started to have these benefits, beyond the physical. And that's what led to my now I got to teach this stuff because it works, and I want to help other people. So that was the timeline.
And yeah, I want to talk about how you took that knowledge that you have, and now you're helping other people with that. So tell us a little bit about that, about the amazing yoga in Pittsburgh and what that's all about.
Yeah, and that's for both of us, we both have our own story. So my wife's story, what got her into yoga, is very early in my NFL career. We found out we were having a baby. And so for her career, she was going to be a school teacher, but she was a school teacher. And then she decided, what, I want to be with the baby. I'm going to put that on hold. So she had that huge shift. And that was really difficult for her because she was only 22, and all her other friends who just graduated from college, they were doing their careers, and she went to school in New York City. So they had all these exciting jobs. And she's wow, my life has changed. And so that was something she had to work with. And that's how she discovered yoga. And so that was her path. And then my path was football. And so that's really what we've brought into our studios, trying to help people, knowing that yoga helped myself and my wife in this unique way, that we just try to make our yoga studios as accessible as possible, knowing that, if people, give it a shot and they have the patience to keep practicing, that they can also have some benefits that could really help them both physically and mentally as well.
And it's interesting too, because there's almost a irony in the juxtaposition between football, masculine, manly men. We breathe fine. We don't need that meditation stuff. There's that kind of an attitude. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times we think of yoga and meditation as being a little bit more feminine. But do you work with other men, other people in sports, perhaps, that, if they just take a little bit of time to open themselves up to it, kind of like if you try it, you might like it. Do you find yourself helping people along that path as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I've worked with the Steelers, also the Pittsburgh Steelers, also the University of Pittsburgh football team, basketball teams, the wrestlers. So I love doing that, giving back that way. But also our regular studio classes, I have a really nice number of men who come to take my class. And I think that's because they feel comfortable with that. So I have a lot of former athletes, but I think but beyond the physical, I feel like these days, like it's luckily it's becoming more mainstream, that I feel like I don't have to make it more about like my sports background. It can just be for whatever someone needs out of it. So it's definitely becoming more mainstream, which is really like helping the growth of yoga for sure.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, mindfulness and just the whole idea. I'm watching the news the other day and they have moments of calm and all
Right,
that. And
right.
it's something that I think, and maybe it's part of the ideology in the Western world too, because this comes from, ancient times and other cultures. And as we're experiencing it and as we're realizing the benefits of it, it's just becoming more and more prevalent. I'm interested, especially young people. I always think of young people when I think of sports, whether they're playing football or soccer, baseball, basketball, whatever it is. What kind of advice? What would you say to them, especially if they are feeling some of those pressures and maybe they have a parent that's pushing them or coaches? What kind of sage advice do you have for kids?
That's such a great question, because we're going through that right now with we have 4 kids, my youngest son, and he really likes baseball and he wants to play it year round. He wants to be on travel teams. These were things that didn't exist, not too long ago. Everyone played, multiple sports, and they also just played. They played sports down the street, and we're starting to see all these overtraining injuries. My story is unique because even though I played multiple sports, the reason why I overtrained was, I believe, is because I had ADD, and so I was just really obsessed and driven. But my biggest advice these days is to just play multiple sports and take rest. Like, it's okay to take time off. Like for example, his baseball season just ended, and now they're already saying, "Hey, who's coming for indoor next week?" And it's kind of crazy because Major League Baseball players, once their season ends, they just golf until February. So I don't know why kids would then do indoor between now and next season. So I think it's just, just keeping whatever sport you're doing like a game and fun, and, finding different things beyond just one sport so that your body doesn't break down in high school or college, because it shouldn't, if we're just, taking, practice in moderation, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think that more parents and kids and schools and everything need to realize that. You mentioned having ADD, and do you feel too with meditation and with everything you're doing that helps as well?
Yeah, it's really helped a lot. I still have it. I'll always have it. But what meditation has really helped me with in the yoga is becoming more aware when I start to go obsessive mind. So I'll have these moments where it could be something as simple as like, I want to redo the 3rd floor or the attic in our house. And so I can become really obsessed by, like, that's the only thing I can think about. And, going back and forth to Home Depot and just, this is everything. But like with meditation and yoga, it helps me, catch myself when I start to get obsessed like that. But, more importantly, what it really helps me with is, just going into any sort of negativity. Like if something isn't going well, like with our job or, something in the news, I can just become really fixated on it. But yoga and meditation through the breathing can help me just, there you go again with that voice of negativity, obsession, be aware of it, and then come back to right now. So that's what that really helps me with. It helps me manage my ADD, I guess you could say.
Right. I can see that. Let's talk specifically about the book, The Point After. Who do you feel this book is for? Who should read it?
Yeah, I think it could be for a couple of different type of readers. One could be, somebody who is possibly interested in yoga or meditation, and because my path was so unusual and I seemed like I was like the last person to ever take it up and benefit from it. But I think also just from the lessons that I learned, that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was not only to maybe, somebody finds something they relate to take up yoga meditation, but also it's just the stories of, like you mentioned earlier, about I think for so many of us, I know me for sure, is that I thought life was supposed to go this way. And when it didn't, how I felt like, oh my goodness, I have no control. Now what? And how at the time I thought that was such a devastating thing. But I think that's like one of the main points of the story. That's why it's called The Point After, was that we're not who we, these identities or these labels that we put on ourselves. And that, like our life isn't going to have this perfect beginning, middle, end, that there's going to be times when we're going to have to, okay, it didn't work out. That's okay. There's something else out for me. And I can't spend too much time, like that quote about like looking at the door that's closed, not realizing that there's one out there that's open for us. And I think that's kind of the idea of the book. We're realizing like, hey, okay, it didn't work out, but hey, there's another opportunity out for me, and it's time for me to let that go.
I can see this book being really great right around this time as well. A great gift for people. It's one of those things where you can give to somebody who's a sports lover, maybe, like you said, somebody who's interested in yoga and meditation. There's a lot of audiences for a book like this.
Yeah, I hope so. When I wrote the book, I was hoping that it wasn't purely like a sports book. And so I took my time writing it. It ended up being 8 years. And that was because I wanted to have everything as try to go back in time as much as I could, like where I was feeling. I would get my Spotify on and I'd play music from that time period in there and just try to bring back the feelings. I would sometimes go to the places, throughout the book where there happened to get back there, and to try to make myself as vulnerable as possible, like what I was feeling, because I was hoping to not make it like, okay, this happened in the game, this happened next. And I tried to go back to like how I was actually feeling, and to be really honest as I could be about like my fears, my insecurities, and all the ups and downs of my career.
And do you find yourself sometimes looking back and just, do you look back with a different perspective as well, where you realize, 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, you were in a different place? How does it feel sometimes when you look back at your former self?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for the longest time, I always thought I had to have this really long career in the NFL. And now looking back, I'm actually really, really glad that it was as short as it was. Because I think if it wasn't as short as it was, I don't know what I would have done at that point there. If I'd have had a longer career, I probably would have had all this money in the bank, because all those NFL contracts that I signed, I never saw any of the money, because if you're not on the team for a certain amount of time, like you don't get it. So luckily I didn't have all this money. So I had to like find like a whole nother career. And so I'm really grateful that happened, versus at the end of the career, just having all this money and then doing something else with it. So I had to move on. And so I look back and like, I used to think that was the worst thing in the world, that I only played for 3 years, but now I think it was the best thing that could have happened.
It's amazing how sometimes that we end up getting what we need rather than what we want, isn't it?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you still watch football? Do you still have friends in the NFL?
Yeah, I still watch it, but I watch it so differently. So I used to watch as a fan. I grew up in a huge Cleveland Browns fan, because my dad was, and so I would live and die by the Browns. And then after that, once I played in the NFL, then it was for about 7 or 8 years while I was like in it or trying to get into it. I would watch it, seeing if like there was a team that needed a kicker. So if I'd be watching it and a kicker would miss one, then two, I'm like, they might need a kicker. So that's how I'd watch it, which was the most unenjoyable way to watch football, seeing if a kicker makes it or misses, or if there's a job opening. But now when I watch it, I just watch it for fun. I certainly root for the teams that I spent some time with, but now I'm more interested in like the players' backstories. I'm a fan, I guess you could say, of the game becoming safer. Because I know what these players go through, and as you mentioned earlier, like I was a kicker, so I didn't have like massive injuries, but like with CTE now, and like players having like devastating like spinal injuries and knee injuries. I watch it more for that, just hoping nobody gets hurt by the end of the game, and just more of the humanity, I guess you could say.
And that would be nice if everybody maybe looked at football a little bit that way. I love football. I love watching games. I grew up watching the Green Bay Packers with my mom. Got that history. But it's true over recent years, because when you start realizing the injuries and the toll that it's taking on the players, it just makes it so not fun anymore. Do you see any solutions or anything that maybe they could do to make it safer, to make it just a little bit better for the players?
Yeah, luckily the players seem to be getting more, I guess you could say, leverage. I think one thing that they found out during this, with the pandemic, is they didn't have training camp this year. So they didn't have that 6 weeks of hitting, and the season started, everything seemed pretty good. So, the players have been pushing for shorter training camps because they play those 4 games. That would be one thing that I would think that would be a massive improvement to player safety, is just less repetitions, less hitting. So if they shorten the preseason, and also, just put less hitting into the practices, because I think the reality is, these head coaches, when there's training camp, they pretty much know who their roster is going to be from player 1 through 39. It's these last 4 or 5 players that are fighting for jobs. So, even the coaches know that as well. So I think that there's ways that they could shorten it. Unfortunately, the other side of that is the more games, the more preseason games, the more money for the owners. And that's the battle that I'm afraid is going to be going on for many years.
True. Well, there are many things that are more important than money now, aren't there?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's what we should realize. So the Super Bowl this year, who do you think? Who are we going to see there? Any picks?
Well, I got to go with we live in Pittsburgh now. We've become Steeler fans, so I got to go with the Steelers. However, Mahomes in Kansas City. My heart says the Steelers, but my mind says that the Chiefs. And on the other side, oh wow, I'm going to go with the Packers. What's the Packers' record right now, as a matter of fact?
Oh, good question. I haven't been keeping up with it. Yeah. That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Definitely, it seems more the AFC has the upper hand this year. But it's such a weird year. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and I just got a text right before this from a friend, hey, the game's canceled this weekend. Because there's with the COVID, there's cases with both teams, and so who knows how these seasons are gonna roll out, especially with things right now. So.
Very true. Very true. But for the NFL fans out there, and the NFL fan on somebody's list, this is a great book to pick up. It's The Point After: How One Resilient Kicker Learned There Was More to Life Than the NFL by Sean Conley. Can you tell people where they can go to find the book and find out more about you online, social media, website, all that stuff?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking. Yeah. My website is seanconley.net. And on there, there's links to different booksellers. So from a variety of those. And then also, if you want to learn about yoga, there's yoga videos on there. There's some resources to learn about meditation if you're looking to get into that. And also just looking to get into yoga. So so seanconley.net. I appreciate that.
You bet. Sean, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah,
this is magnificent. I enjoyed this talk so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. This was fun.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being here today on the Books That Make You show. As always, please join us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't already. And please, until next time, my friends, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.